if you're just tuning in, General Mark Miley was so fearful that Donald Trump might spark a war with China, he made secret phone calls to his counterpart in Beijing to assure him it would not happen, according to a new book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. General Miley, Mark Miley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, assured his Chinese counterpart, General Li Zhuxing of the People's Liberation Army, the U.S. would not strike, and if President Trump ordered to strike, that Miley would tip off China and give them a heads up so it wasn't a surprise. Not only that, he also rearranged a U.S. military exercise in the South China Sea so as to be less provocative after getting intelligence that the Chinese thought the U.S. might start a war and were headed towards some sort of war footing or some such. The proper course of action for Miley, of course, is to go to the Secretary of Defense and say, our intelligence indicates the Chinese are taking military actions that may lead to war based on what they perceive as our instability and thinking President Trump may want to attack. Perhaps we should do something. Or go to the president and say, Mr. President, the Chinese believe we're on the verge of attacking them as a distraction from the election. We may need to reassure them. Instead, Miley took it upon himself to not only go to his Chinese counterpart, but to also tell his Chinese counterpart that he would tell the Chinese if we were going to attack. But not just that. He also proactively reached out to Nancy Pelosi and told Nancy Pelosi he had taken steps to ensure the president's power would be constrained. So let's say you're looking at this, and I'll be honest with you, I'm sympathetic to what Miley's situation was. Now, just listen to me before you get mad at me. I'm in the camp that doesn't think the election was stolen. And I know many of you think it was. We'll just agree to disagree on this. Miley's in the camp that doesn't think it was stolen. He sees Donald Trump out there agitating for the election. He sees what happens on January 6th. He sees Donald Trump escalating his rhetoric with China, and in his mind, he doesn't like Donald Trump. And he thinks this guy's going to start a war with China and dare us to throw him out of office. I got to do something. And so he decides, he gets intelligence. The Chinese are afraid of the same thing. The Chinese are worried that's what Donald Trump is going to do because they're Chinese communists. That's what they would do to hold on to power. So Miley decides they need to be reassured. Okay, I'm sympathetic to that. But it doesn't justify what he did. In the United States of America, the military is under civilian control. That civilian is the President of the United States of America with a Secretary of Defense who is a civilian and undersecretaries of defense who are civilians. In fact, in the case of Lloyd Austin, the current Secretary of Defense, he had to resign from the military and be given special dispensation by Congress just to serve as a civilian Secretary of Defense. You can't do what Miley did, and if you do it, then you resign. Listen, let's say you think that Miley should do what he did. Okay, you think that everything Miley did was above board. It was designed to diffuse the situation and ensure there's no war with China. I got you. Sometimes you do the right thing, and the right thing then still requires you to resign. You don't get to hold on to the job after you've done the right thing. Sometimes you have to follow the sword. That is a historic lesson. You do what you think is right, and then you have to live with the consequences. And sometimes the consequences are, I've done this, now I need to get out of the way. Why? Because I have now set a precedent for military influence in the civilian chain of command. And I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. But if I don't resign, now I'm setting a precedent for future chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to also undermine their presidents of the United States. And my role and my position requires trust between the president and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to maintain civilian control of the military. I know there are some of you out there who so hate Donald Trump that you're glad Mark Miley was there. But he has now set a precedent for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to do this to a Democratic president. He set the precedent for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to do it to Joe Biden if he thinks Biden's out to lunch. And having a military officer undermining the duly elected president of the United States, you've got to be willing to recognize, unless you're completely broken, that's not a good thing. Alexander Vindman worked in the White House for the National Security Council. He was convinced the president of the United States was breaking the law by pressuring Ukraine to get evidence on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. And he leaked. He went to Democrats in Congress and said, here's what I believe is going on. Alexander Vindman has been vilified by the right. He got fired. He lost his job. He suffered the consequences of what he thought was right. Even he is out today. This is his tweet. If this is true, General Miley must resign. He usurped civilian authority, broke chain of command, and violated the sacrosanct principle of civilian control over the military. It's an extremely dangerous precedent. You simply can't walk away from that. You can think it was a smart thing for Miley to do, but you need to understand precedents matter here. This is a really, really, really groundbreaking moment in American history because it is the first time in public that we know of that a senior ranking military officer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, no less, went behind his commander-in-chief's back to directly undermine his commander-in-chief, to both the Congress, which has no say outside of budgetary parameters and laws and declaration of war. They're not the commander-in-chief. He went to the Speaker of the House to badmouth his commander-in-chief and insist that he put in place procedures by which his commander-in-chief would be unable to give orders. If you think Donald Trump is mentally off his rocker, as a lot of people did after January 6th and after the election, you can say, well, God bless General Miley. I'm glad he did it. But he can't stay now.